Hello and welcome to the My Footballing Journey series. I'm Joe, and this week I'm joined by Andy Watson. Andy is an independent recruitment analyst who's completed projects for clubs across the globe, works in a permanent position with Blackburn Rovers Football Club, and has involvement with renowned MRKT Insights. We're going to discuss Andy's take on recruitment, his journey into the game, and much more. So, Andy, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Joel. Nice to see you again. We've worked together a few times in the past. It's like old times, this. It's like old social media times.
It is like old times. It's really, really good to have you here. We've done, I think, four of these up to press, and you'll be our fifth. We've got a few more to come, and the idea is to get a bit of a sprinkling into loads of different aspects. And I think with your experience, this could be really insightful. So yeah, let's start with your journey. Let's go right to the beginning. How did this all begin for you?
My footballing journey, I suppose you could say began, I think, with a lot of people as being a massive fan of football. Like you almost forget when you work in football the complete and utter joy that football can provide for you. And sometimes I do think it's important for us as professionals to to kind of recall those feelings that you had. And for me, that was it was in the Darwin end, standing in the Darwin end, in the it actually was the late 80s, believe it or not, 1989. When my dad first started taking me down to Ewood Park. And, those, just the scene, the smells, the atmosphere. It's just amazing to think that obviously it was so long ago, but you can still almost viscerally feel that if you take yourself back to that time. And that's something that's never left me, and that's why no matter where I've gone and what I've done, because I've not always worked in football, football's always dragged me back in. And I suppose like the journey that's led me to this point, I did, I played football all my life. I went to university and did a sport and exercise development degree at Sunderland. So that was obviously very important to me because when I decided that I was going to go to university, I was, people in working class Blackburn didn't necessarily go to university. Blackburn doesn't have one. The closest one is actually a fair few miles away, and none of my family had ever been to university. So when I decided that I was going to do that, the thing that motivated me the most was what do I love doing, and so sports in general, um, and then football specifically was what motivated me the most, and that's why I decided to do that. And I'm glad that I did because even though after I did that degree, I actually became a maths teacher and I did all sorts of traveling and different jobs. Eventually, it's come back around to football, and actually I was made redundant from a bookmaker. I was working for a bookmaker for 5 years in play odds. It wasn't even with football; it was in tennis. But I was made redundant because they were downsizing the team, and it was at that point there that I decided that actually, my why am I not doing what my passion is, which is football?
Mm.
And I've always been involved in data, math, sport. Those have been the common threads throughout my life. And so at that point, I was like, right, well, I'd seen some people on Twitter starting to put things out there, like Jay, Blades Analytic was obviously big at the time. And, people were starting to kind of get quite good traction on this sort of stuff. It wasn't quite in the mainstream media at this point, but it was getting towards that point. And so I decided to just start kind of looking into Blackburn Rovers and football in general and what the data was saying about the performances and how that compared to my how I viewed it as a fan. And then that grew from there, and you know, and I suppose that's brought us to where we are now.
Yeah, I mean it's funny, isn't it? Like you say, everyone has a different journey, but you actually go back right to the roots, and everyone kind of has the same journey in this game. So I think that's very pertinent. So kind of bringing things round to now, then let's talk a little bit about what you do so that people can get an idea. I mean, I described you as an independent recruitment analyst. Is that how you describe yourself? And what does that really mean?
Yeah, I quite like that. I don't know that I've ever used that exact phrase, but that's yeah, that's good. I suppose I looked into Blackburn Rovers initially and started producing some shows on YouTube, which you were kindly very much a part of, the Stats Show, and then that was on the Rovers Chat YouTube channel. and that did that did very well. I think it wasn't necessarily massive in terms of the number of people that watched it, but I think the caliber of people that watched it must have been quite good because I started getting some really good guests on there, and then people started saying, "Well, I've seen your stuff on YouTube," and then I started my own website, and then I started kind of referring to myself as Andy Watson Sport, and then came up with my own kind of role scouting system a couple of years ago, which again I think was very beneficial in terms of who saw that and what went into that. And so I think that really, if I start there, that kind of informs my view on recruitment, or it certainly did then. It's probably changed even since then, in that the way that I want teams or recruitment teams to work is that they need to know what they're looking for, basically. They need to be specific in the players that they're looking for because we can all watch football. I think most people can watch football and identify who the best players are on the pitch at the time. And that is relevant, but are they the right type of player for the team that you're trying to create or the squad that you're trying to create?
Mm.
And so I thought about that a bit more and decided that the way that I wanted to look at things was through roles rather than positions. So I'm not looking for a left back. I'm not looking for, a central midfielder. I'm looking for a ball playing midfielder, someone who can do X, Y, and Z. So it might be able to take the ball on the back foot, or they might, you might even have a metric in your head that says, I want them to produce, 5 line breaking passes in the game or something like that. Be as specific as that. And what I would be able to do, or what I thought that a recruitment analyst should be able to do, is to be able to look into the world of football, however big or small that may be. Obviously, in the UK, we have certain limitations on the players that we can bring in due to work permits and things like that. In Europe and in the world, those don't necessarily apply, so it makes it a bigger
Mm.
a pool of talent. Um, but you should be able to tailor what you can look at and use then the data to go back as far or as not far as you want and come up with a pool of players that are interesting. But
Yeah.
then there's so much more that goes into that. That's just an identification tool, and you know I feel like I have the skills to then be able to take that further if clubs want that, or if the individual that I'm working with wants that and wants me to then look into the player by video or even go and watch them live, which is obviously more your end of things,
Yeah.
Joe. I know you can do all that as well. Um, but yeah, so that's where kind of the basis of my beliefs come from, and that's the role scouting system. That's it's still up there on my website. It's still a bit old now, and I have said that I'm updating that at the moment because, and maybe we'll move on to this now. Like my things change and my opinions have changed, and I'm always trying to look for the edge, and that's what that was about 2 years ago because I
Mm.
didn't think that certain clubs or teams were being specific enough in what they were wanting. I think that's probably changed a bit now, where actually a lot of clubs do have these systems now. They've employed people or they've, you know, used StatsBomb or Wirescout in a way that they are being a lot more specific. So then it's about, okay, well, if everyone's doing that, how
Mm.
can you get an edge, especially if you're working for a club or whoever that don't have the resources and the budget that others do, and therefore they probably get ahead of the game in areas that don't concern us, like negotiations and contracts and you
Yeah.
know and transfer fees even. So yeah,
Mm.
that's where I am at the moment. And with market insights, I'll expand on that a little bit more because my role is slightly different there in that what I do with market insights. I've done that sort of thing with clients that they've had before, but my role is kind of morphed into more of a research project and data research sort of role where ad hoc projects will come in. And, recently I've worked on global recruitment strategy for a couple of European clubs. I've worked on, helping people get into jobs in the industry in terms
Mm.
of like helping them with their CVs or helping them with proving that they are able to do what they say they're able to do. Um, so it's a very varied role, one that I'm very happy with and kind of suits my you know my life, my family role as well, because like working in football, as everyone listening to this podcast will probably be aware of, is very intense. It can be
Mm,
very time intensive, and I have three young kids and a family who I prioritize over everything. So you know that means that my time during the days is often devoted to them, which
mm,
can be difficult when you're working full time in a club. And this is probably the reason why I don't work full time in a club, is
mm.
because I want to be able to safeguard that time for my family.
So I think, a lot of people that are listening, especially on the Patreon page, are younger uni students now looking to try and get in now. Do you think that's probably the key difference for you in that you potentially started to get into this a little bit later? You have other very important commitments that you obviously care very much about. Is it potentially one of those things where you say, well, if you are 18 and this is what you want to do and you go into university, then throw yourself into it now while you have the time and resources to do it?
Absolutely. I kind of almost gave away my age earlier already, so I might as well say I'm 39 years old in April. So I'm obviously in a different phase of life than a lot of other people kind of getting into this. And when I was 16 going to college, there was no such thing as football analytics. There
Mm-hmm.
was, it was completely different thing. And if there was, then you could bet your bottom dollar that I would have been first in
Yeah.
line to try and like get involved in that.
Do you find that
Um,
difficult? Is that hard to accept that is where time is at now, or have you kind of got your head around that?
no, I don't find it hard to accept. It's enthusiasm. Like it enthuses me more than anything else. Like,
Mm,
and this is a this is the benefit of being 39 years old, is that you have you've kind of can come to terms with that. I think I can see the point of asking that question, because
mm,
a lot of people have the mindset of, well, I wish that this had happened, or I wish the circumstances were different. But what I come to realize now, having been through peaks and troughs in my life, is that everything that has happened has led you to the position that you're currently in. So, like me and my wife actually had a conversation about this last night. That she'd had an interview actually about mental health. She works in mental health, and someone interviewed her because she, has been through tough times, documented that herself, and someone's found her story, and because she's doing so well now, they actually interviewed her on mental health and how he can come out the other end and be so positive.
mm,
And the conversation that we had yesterday was, if you could go back to your younger self and tell them, if you make these decisions, it's going to cause a lot of hurt and anxiety and difficulty to A, yourself, and B, other people. Would you have that conversation with your younger self?
mm.
And it's a very deep and difficult question to answer. I don't, and this is obviously not what you thought about when you asked me to come on the podcast, but I will address it now that I've brought it up myself. Um, and I don't think I would, because
Mm,
you've you've got to allow someone that growth, and people will make mistakes. Everyone listening to this podcast has made and will continue to make mistakes. And it's those things that allow you to, and if you can approach it properly, you can see them eventually as learning opportunities.
mm,
And do I wish that I hadn't made some of the mistakes that I made? Of course, because I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to hurt myself. I don't want to make those errors in the first place. But I accept now that that has formed me as I am today, and the decisions that I make with my arrangements with clubs and the way that I work is directly impacted by that, because I've decided that I want to put family first, because I believe that that's the best thing long term for my family and my children. And does that upset some people that work in clubs? Probably.
mm,
But a lot of people that I work with that are in the recruitment team at Blackburn and other recruitment teams that I've worked in are often young with no ties. And definitely for those people that are looking into doing this, like now is the time to upskill yourself, to get yourself as much involved in as many different parts of the game as you can, because all of it is education and all of it is going to build towards what you're able to do then going forwards. And if you think that you're working too hard, that's also very important to realize. But whilst you have the opportunity, and I know that if I'd have, when I was 18, got the opportunity to go to a club for a day of experience or an internship or whatever, then I probably would have taken that up, and I would, recommend that people try and get involved in as much as they can, and don't worry about if it's not specifically what you want to do.
Mm.
Because let's just say you want to be a scout, you want to be in stadiums and all that sort of stuff. More and more, scouts are being asked to be able to do the data side of things, or at least have an understanding of the data side of things. So if there's a club that says come into the office and we'll show you, our data recruitment system, absolutely bite their hands off that opportunity.
If you're listening to this episode on Spotify or watching on YouTube and you want full access to the unedited version of this podcast, you need to check out our Patreon page. For just £5 a month, you'll have access to exclusive conversations such as these, one-to-one guidance with myself to help and boost your career aspirations, and much more.